Good evening and welcome to the Writer's Block. I'm your host, John Ronan, and during these half-hour programs I'll be interviewing writers about their craft in writing, their careers in writing. Those careers might be in poetry, they might be in fiction, they might be in nonfiction, they might be in advertising, copywriting. We plan to cast a very, very wide net. We'll be sharing information here on the Writer's Block, but we'll have a good time doing it as well. The show will be varied, relaxed, and open to your comments as well. If you have ideas for us here at the Writer's Block, or if you'd like to be on the Writer's Block, watch for our address at the end of the program. Tonight's guest is Charles Taylor, a novelist, at least presently a novelist, although he's been through many, many different careers in the publishing industry. After serving as a destroyer officer for 3 years in the Atlantic, in fact, his working life has been completely in the publishing business. First as a college textbook salesman, then later as a mathematics textbook editor, and then beginning in 1971, I don't want to make him too old, he started his own textbook production company for publishers. In 1979, Chuck moved to Manchester, where he established his own literary agency and also began writing his own fiction. His first book, Show of Force, was published by St. Martin's Press in 1980 and then later by Berkeley in paperback in 1981. He subsequently decided that Manchester wasn't a great location to be a literary agent, but it was to be a writer. So he continued his novelist career, and since then has published such titles as The Sunset Patriots, First Salvo, Choke Point, Silent Hunter, Counter-Strike, Warship, Boomer, and, coming out right now, Deep Sting. Let's go over now and meet Chuck. Hi, Chuck.
John, how are you tonight? Very nice to see you.
I appreciate you coming up here. I know you just flew up from New York and raced over here to be on the show.
I've been looking forward to it.
Appreciate the time. We were talking just before the show about the novel that's coming out right now, Deep Sting.
Right.
And I thought we might as well go to that first.
Wonderful idea.
This is Deep Sting. I'm going to hold that up, hopefully without glare, so the audience can see it. And it's being published right now.
It's the advanced reading copy you have right there that I've had for about 4 or 5 months. That's been circulated among the bookstore owners, the buyers for the wholesalers, reviewers. The cover will look just like that when it comes out. It should be in the store almost any day.
Is that glare? Is that a good shot?
If you catch some of that foil, that's the way it's supposed to stand out on the racks.
Deep Sting, can you tell us something about that?
I was talking to somebody the other day about what the title means, Deep Sting. Does it mean the miniature submarines that are involved in the story and an attack, not really an attack, an intelligent attack against the Trident submarine base in Bangor, Washington? Or does it mean the U.S. Navy SEALs and the Soviet Navy Spetsnaz who are opposing each other underneath the waters? They're both deep, yes. What is the Deep Sting? The reader's going to have to find that out. I enjoy it.
You don't want to give it away.
You can't give it away. You have to read it.
Okay. I'll plan on that. Before the show, you also mentioned a sort of a connection between the recent Gulf War and the emphasis placed on highly technological weapons during that war, and war, spy, suspense novels.
Yeah, is it going to influence this market?
I don't know if I got the right category.
Yeah.
But yeah, is that influencing the market?
This is a very interesting idea. I, of course, hope that this is going to have a great influence not only in this book, but the previous books I've written, because they're very much like Steve Kuntz's novels, Tom Clancy's, the technological confrontation stories. But the thing that I think will be most telling in the sales may be the public's reaction to if they want to read a book like this when the war has been so close. If you remember the story, The Flight of the Intruder, which was a best-selling novel by Steve Kuntz. That movie was released 2 days after the air war started. I think the air war started January 15th, 16th. The movie came out 2 days after that. I happened to be in Quebec at the time, so I didn't have a chance to go to the premiere showing. When I got back here, first thing I wanted to do within a week was go see the movie. It was off the screens. It bombed.
Yeah.
It didn't get a decent review. The theaters were empty. And when I was talking with my editor about this the other day, who was also Steve Kuntz' editor, and Steve is a friend of mine, Steve said when the war started, he says, the movie's going to be dead. He says, people don't want to see what's actually happening. So, are we too close or not? I'm not sure. It's going to be a very interesting reaction. Are people going to want to involve themselves in this military world, this high-tech world, which they've been seeing on the TV screen for a couple of months? I don't know.
So it could go either way. It could be a tremendous advantage, could be a tremendous
I hope it's a tremendous advantage.
Well, at least when the movie comes out, it'll be farther away from the war. The movie will do well.
I hope so. That would be wonderful. Let's hope for a movie.
Sure. I guess, well, I'm talking about a couple of the books, and we held that up. I want to make sure that I mention a couple of these others, and since I'm going to ask you how you get to be a very successful novelist, I want to point out some of the other books you brought. Counter-Strike, Boomer, and Warship are 3 other novels. Are these the 3 most recent aside from...
Yes, Boomer is the last one. That came out just about a year before this show in May of 1990. Still on the market, still selling. Warship was the year before, and Counter-Strike was the year before that.
Does that glare too much? Am I doing a good job? Just want to show those for a second.
As long as you can see the title and identify the cover, that's wonderful.
Sort of like, I don't care what you say, as long as you spell my name correctly.
Right. As far as the designer is concerned, as long as somebody sees that cover on the rack, they've done their job.
Now I'm going to ask you the big question. I'm going to ask you to spill the secret magic to our vast audience.
All right.
What does one do to become a successful novelist? What should they go out and do right now?
What should they do right now? That is a tough question.
They should stay and watch the rest of the show.
You said I just came back from New York to be on the show. I've spent a lot of time with my agent and my editor the last couple of days. We've been discussing exactly what this is. And
what the magic is?
What the magic is. And we had a number of subjective answers, none of which any of us were sure about, and we were talking about everybody from myself, the author, to the agent, to the editor, in progress, right through the marketing people, the advertising people in a publishing company, up to the president of the company, and who gets behind the book. Even the bookstore managers, we didn't miss those either. And what makes an author successful is probably the toughest question you could ever ask an author. I would like to think that whatever I write is something that people must be fascinated with. They really want to get into this book and find out what's coming out of my mind, what is making this story so important. And how many thousand authors do you think are trying to do this, and how many ever really make it and get that attention? I'm really not sure. Hunt for Red October was the first fiction novel published by the Naval Institute about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was languishing. They printed, I think, 10,000 copies the first printing. And I knew about it because I'm a member of the Naval Institute, and the only sales they had were literally through the membership for a while. It was on the stands, or it was a hardcover, but it really wasn't moving. Somehow, somebody got a copy to Ronald Reagan, who was president at the time. He made a comment about this fascinating book he'd read. He couldn't believe about this Russian submarine defecting, and I think he probably wanted to rub it into the Russians a little bit. The book took off. It is, I think, in its 69th printing in paperback now. The movie's been a tremendous success.
I think something...
What was it that made the book take off? Was it the author? Was it Ronald Reagan? Was it the Russians?
So you're saying, to a great extent, authors, even if they're very dedicated, are at the mercy of circumstance. As Flight of the Intruder, as the movie was for Intruder, kind of bombed despite whatever merits it might have because of outside circumstances.
You're at the mercy of the market, of the reviewers, of editors. I've discussed many times how one of my books should be published. My first one, Show of Force, came out in 1980 in hardcover. And I was very fortunate to be a first-time author and have the book published in hardcover. And they printed 5,000 copies. They sold, I think, 3,600 copies. And after that I said, wait a minute, I don't think I'm too excited about spending a whole year working to sell 3,600 copies of a book. But since Show of Force came out, it's been published in paperback in a number of different languages. It's still in print. In the U.S., it's been continually in print now for 10 years in paperback. I can't tell you how many hundred thousand copies it's sold in paperback. It's still selling in Japan, the UK under that printing. It's been being reprinted in Poland and other European countries. Yeah, since that market has opened up. So paperback is selling tremendously. The hardcover isn't. Now, should I get back into hardcover?
Was that reissued in hardcover then, after the paperback success?
The only other hardcover edition of Show of Force that's ever been really successful has been in Japanese. And that sold 25,000 copies in Japan the first year, and then it's been a tremendous success in paperback. But what is it? I'm talking about all these countries. What is it that's making a book like that a success? Was it me? Was it the title? Hardcover, softcover. You've got to have a good story. Characters are very important. And you've got to draw somebody into that story and the characters and how they're going to react.
Is it so? You're making kind of a dividing line there between the creation, the artistic creation of a novel, characters, plot, setting, and the business end.
That's what I think makes it go.
What's more important?
My point of view, for the year or year and a half I'm working on that book, the development, the creation of those ideas and the characters are the most important thing. But what really sells that book and what makes it popular enough or makes it successful enough so that the publisher can afford to pay me to keep on writing is the business end of that book.
I think something similar happened to the James Bond books as happened to Hunt for Red October. I think Jack Kennedy mentioned